Okay, and there we go. Floor's yours, David.
So this co-op ESOP law in Slovenia was passed on October 23rd, and Vlas and I were over at a high school reunion that my last years of high school were at an army base in Italy, and every 5 years or so we come back to Italy, and I didn't have to come back. I was already over, just a 5-hour drive over to Montecatini near Florence in Italy, and the law passed, and that guy who was the CEO of my institute was trying to call me. And some reason my cell phone didn't work, and Vlasta and all the women in our group were having a hens meeting, all the wives, and so he called up Vlasta, and she ran out of the hens meeting to come and say, reboot your cell phone, it's not working, and the law has passed. So that's how I learned. And so it was result of like a 33-year, if you date it back to my first rodeo in Slovenia, which was 1990, 91. And when the law ESOP law we did failed due to Jeff Sachs, and then we actually defeated his law. He tried to do a voucher law, which would give everybody shares for free, but not in your own company necessarily. So everybody would become like a day trader on the stock market, and abolish the connection between where you work and having voting shares. And we defeated his law. And so the company I had set up couldn't do any privatization. We did one rogue privatization. It's another story. But that's when I joined the World Bank back in 93. And then, so this was, what was it, 30 years later or so, this law finally passed. So the one way to understand it is to go back to the origin of it. And it was the brainchild of Los Kelso, a San Francisco lawyer. And he wrote these books, the Capitalist Manifesto, to be sort of the capitalist version of the Communist Manifesto, and New Capitalist, how to turn 80 million workers into capitalists on borrowed money. And he's the one that convinced Senator Russell Long to pass the law in 76, or actually in more like 74, but then they added tax benefits that made it more effective. And Russell Long was the son of Huey Long, who was a populist from Louisiana and ran against Roosevelt with the slogan of a chicken in every pot and so forth. So this was Russell Long's attempt to sort of implement something like the populism of his father to get shares to workers through this employee ownership plan. So that's the origin. And I can say a little bit more about it later on. One of his famous quotes was, "The only problem with capitalism is not enough capitalists." So the thing was seen politically as a way to turn workers into capitalists. In other words, to turn workers into shareholders and in their own company, which is a peculiar definition of capitalist, but never mind. And the previous way workers got shares, which dates back to the 19th century, and a lot of your big companies, is called employee share purchase plan. So that's where a company may do profit sharing, and then you can choose to use your share in the profits to buy shares in the company. And the shares usually would have a discount, or maybe even the company would make a matching contribution, something like that. So those were called employee share purchase plans, or ESPPs. And that's the way there was any employee ownership up to the mid-70s in the United States. And they never amounted to much, because most of the people that could buy shares were already managers or white-collar workers who had discretionary income and could afford to spend their bonuses on shares. So the real revolution, the sort of seismic shift in employee ownership in America really started with Kelso in this notion of the ESOP. And the difference is that the shares are not paid for out of payroll or bonuses, but are paid for out of the future earnings of the company. So I'll explain that in a bit. But that was really the major shift. And that changed everything because, number one, workers didn't have to put up any money to get shares, and workers qualified to be a member of the ESOP where they would get shares automatically by working in the company. You know, you might have a 6-month or a year probationary period. So workers were getting shares based on their labor and the fact that they worked in the company, and, you know, which is like a worker cooperative where you're a member of the cooperative based on your patronage, which in a worker cooperative is labor in the company. So this, in spite of all the rhetoric about capitalism, the real difference was that he had a plan based on labor, that you got membership in the ESOP based on working in the company, and then you got shares automatically paid for by the future revenues of the company, as I will explain. So that's the real difference. And because it was pitched as a way to solidify capitalism, it has been supported by both sides of the aisle in the United States. I mean, just there have been 2 bills in the last few weeks that have passed in the Senate, which were unanimous in the Senate, bills that made various changes in ESOP law.
David, when you say we, are you talking Slovenia or US?
Which we?
You said we've had 2 laws passed.
Oh,
recently.
yeah. No, I mean the ESOP people in the States.
In the state, okay.
The American Senate just passed a few days ago, I think, 2 laws unanimously that are about ESOPs. And
Are they in session? Is it just come?
the Senate is in session, the House is not.
Okay, okay. Thank you for.
So how they fare in the House will depend on whenever the House gets back together.
Yeah.
And so forth.
Okay.
So the statistics are pretty good. There's around 6,500 ESOPs in America now, and the striking thing is they cover 10% of the private workforce. So you don't have ESOPs, obviously, for federal employees or state employees, but for the private workforce, about 10% of them, so 1 in every 10 workers on the average, is a part owner of their company. And, you know, we've said before, you've got 2 of them right there in Riverside or Moreno Valley, the Winco company in Moreno Valley, and the, what's that appliance company? I've forgotten the name of it, which is also an ESOP. So you have 2 of them right there. So, and one of the problems, which we could go into, is that this number is no longer growing. And you have about 250 ESOP created new every year now, and maybe a bit more than that are actually sold out and dissolved because they sell out to private equity or to a trade buyer, you know, a competitor that wants to capture more of the market and so forth. And so one of the problems in the American ESOP is, in spite of their success, it has completely plateaued at about this number and slowly going down. And so we have, in our ESOP, we've corrected what we think are a lot of the mistakes, which were basically legal artifacts of the way the American ESOP was done. So we're not just copying the American ESOP, we made major improvements in it to avoid this problem of having more sellouts than new ESOPs, so the actual numbers going down. So let's go over the major ideas here. I've already mentioned it's not a share purchase plan. And so it's a situation where the major source of it is not public companies, but private companies where the owner is retiring. And there's a huge amount of companies that are where owners are retiring soon. And in the old days, you might say, well, the oldest son would take over and all that. Well, that doesn't happen much anymore. And if it's bought by a competitor, then you'll get paid good money because the competitor is getting a strategic advantage and would pay you more money than just a financial buyer. You'd be a trade buyer, what's called a trade buyer. But they're not going to run two companies. And so they'll take the customer list and the maybe the best people over to their main company and slowly wind down the company. So
1 minute.
So the community in which the firm is located, so we're talking about not big public companies, but small, medium-sized companies, will not exist in 5 to 8 years. And as the assets are wound down and the jobs are switched to the main company. If it's bought by private equity, then it just gets gutted in the way that private equity guts companies. We can go into that, but it won't exist then after 5 years. And if it's bought by just a financial buyer, which is some sort of financial fund, they want to minimize the cost. They have no commitment to the community that the company was in. And so we have plenty of examples here in Slovenia where the World Bank and all the multilateral agencies were urging Slovenia to bring in foreign capital and so forth. And that's crucial to bring in capital and technology and everything else. And of course, what happens is that they then, once they get control of the company, they want to reduce the labor costs. Slovenia is like a Nordic country in the sense they have very substantial social welfare state and paid for out of payroll. So then they move the jobs to Bosnia or Bulgaria or wherever. So if you want to keep the company in the community where it is and where you're paying taxes and the wages and so forth, then the best option is really an employee buyout. And so that's been in the United States and even here, this has been one of the main selling points of ESOPs. The alternative selling point, of course, workers are more efficient if they're working for themselves. And so we have a number of high-tech companies in Slovenia that want to keep their better employees there. And this is a way to increase retention because the longer you stay in the company, the more shares you get and so forth. So they want a company of owners and that will attract the better people in who are engineers or programmers or whatever it may be, because Slovenia has a very high-tech economy. So those are sort of the selling points, and I can go into some of those later. But the structure is an ESOP is a separate legal entity from the company. So you have the company, and then you have this what's called special purpose vehicle that owns the shares for the workers. The workers don't get direct individual ownership of shares. And instead they have an account inside the ESOP which says you have such and such number of shares or such and such number of amount of value, because at the end of the day you can't take the shares with you. You can only have the shares bought back by the ESOP, and so it's really value is what counts. And in our ESOP we emphasize to keep these internal accounts denominated in value rather than in shares, but in the American case, they're denominated in shares. And so the ESOP itself is a common law trust in the United States. And this is one of the key characteristics that we changed. but it's the shareholder of record. And the workers then have these individual share accounts inside the ESOP, which says you own indirectly so many shares. You cannot sell the shares that are in your account. You cannot mortgage them. You cannot bequeath them, and so forth. They will eventually be bought back by the ESOP itself. So another key point here is this is not just something for managers or white-collar employees. All employees are included. And in the American law, the only way employees can be excluded is if you have a union that refuses to go into the ESOP, and then they can be excluded, which obviously doesn't help the ownership culture inside the company. The most famous example of that was United Airlines. If you remember, for a few years, United Airlines was 55% owner of United through an ESOP. The workers were owners, but not all the workers, because there were 3 unions: pilots, mechanics, and stewardesses. And in order to get the deal financed, you had to buy 55% of United Airlines all in one deal. There had to be, people had to take wage cuts. And the pilots could take wage cuts very easily, the machinists fairly easily. But the stewardesses said, no, we can't, we're living paycheck to paycheck. We've always never got the same treatment by the company that pilots or mechanics did. And so their union, the stewardesses union, excluded it. So that was the exception. And that, of course, blew up a few years later. It's a long story. But that's, so in our ESOP and in the typical ESOP in America, everybody's included after 6 months or a year of probation to see that you're an employee. And as I said, it's indirect ownership. You can't sell the shares or you can't bequeath them to somebody else. So the idea is, that the seller will be bought out over, whatever amount they're selling in the first deal, 30%, 50%, whatever it is, over 5 to 10 years. And there are 2 ways you do it. You take out a loan, and then you pay off the seller of shares all at once, and then you pay off the bank that gave you the loan over the 5 or 10 years. Or you do it the other way around. The seller gives you the credit, so the seller agrees, and that's called seller finance, and they will then be paid off over 5 or 10 years. So it's a smooth transition. It's not something that happens all at once, and the workers only get shares as the loan is paid off, or as the seller finance is paid off. So the shares are in the ESOP, but they're not assigned to workers until the loan, or only as the loan is paid off. So, if you're the owner of the company, you don't want to sort of turn it over all at once. You don't know how it's going to work. But this way, the shares slowly build up over time. And so it's a gradual transition. So here's sort of an example of our law, which is sometimes called the Euro ESOP, which is a rather pretentious name because it's the first ESOP in Europe, but it's only in Slovenia, of course. So we have replaced the trust with a EOC, Employee Ownership Cooperative. So why replace the special purpose vehicle to hold the shares with a cooperative instead of a trust? Well, number one, trusts are creatures of common law countries. So the British Commonwealth and America are common law countries, but all the countries in Europe are civil law countries, and they don't have the same trust law. And in where you do have the trust law, its main purpose is to where you don't trust somebody. So you have a rich uncle that dies, and you have a kid that's 15 years old, and he inherits several $100,000. You don't just give him the money. You set up a trust, and then when the kid becomes of age, depending on the the will of the rich uncle who died. He gets the money when he turns 21, or the money can only be used to pay for college or something else. So a trust is when you don't trust someone. But the normal use of trust is that they dissolve after a few years because the kids grow up. The other purpose, of course, is when old people become senile and can't handle their own affairs anymore, then you have a trust that will take charge of their property, and that will be temporary too, because they'll eventually die, and then the trust will be dissolved in favor of the heirs of the person. So, but in the American ESOP, the trust is permanent. So the workers are treated like permanent children. They never grow up and never get out of the situation where their decisions are actually made by a trustee, who is usually a friend of the managers or the retiring owner, some guy in a bank, a trust department of a bank, and that is basically just a class prejudice that workers are like children, they cannot run their own affairs, so we number one, we eliminate the trust. Well, pragmatically, because we don't have trust law in civil law countries, but because we don't want this permanent treatment of workers as children. So that's what EOC stands for, Employee Ownership Cooperative. And cooperative was the only legal form that we could find that was able to distribute money to the members. There's such a thing as a foundation in Europe, Stiftung in German, but you can't distribute money to the members. It even has members. And so cooperative has been, every country has cooperative laws. So that's what we did. So here's step one. And we're doing the case where you have a note, in other words, an IOU from some bank made a loan. The company guarantees the note. So this is unlike the case where workers try to buy a company on their own, where they have to take out individual loans and the banks don't want to give them individual loans. So the company, which is a normal company, guarantees the note. So it says we will make contributions of cash here, step 4, to the cooperative time to pay off the note. And then the money, the cash, just passes through here in stage 2, passes through, and the seller gets the money. And no, actually this is, this is not a bank loan. This is the seller finance case. We're not paying back the bank, we're paying back the seller. So this is seller finance, the note is from the seller. And that's the typical case when things start out, because banks don't know what the hell an ESOP is in the early days. And our institute and some friends in the capital sector just did a paper analyzing the whole, what's called market gap in Slovenia, that there's no financial institution to make those loans to ESOPs. So negotiations are going on to try to get a special fund in the Slovene Development Bank, which would fund ESOPs, so forth. So this example I have here is a seller finance. And so you make the contributions, the money passes through to the seller, and it's only then that the shares are individuated. So the shares are like collectively held until they're paid off. So the workers, as it were, earning the shares by generating enough extra revenue in the company to pay off the note. Then later on, you see, now we're talking about employee members here. They no longer have a tie on. And so after you pay off the note, you continue to have ESOP contributions, and then you buy back the oldest shares in people's accounts. So that's like on a first in, first out basis. The member accounts, as they get shares in their accounts, or if they have value denominated accounts, when they get value in their account, it has a date on it. Just like when you have a savings book for a savings account, you have a date on when you put money into the account or when you make a withdrawal. So you pay off the oldest ones first, and then the shares are recycled to the current members based on their labor. And so the repurchased shares are redistributed to the members. So this is another difference to the American ESOP, because the American ESOP is a pension plan. It's a special type of pension plan, and pension plans are normally forbidden to reinvest more than a few percent back in the shares of the company. So like General Motors would have a private pension plan, it could not buy more than a certain single-digit percent of General Motors shares. So the ESOP in American law is a carve-out that says there's a special type of pension plan called an ESOP, and it can invest up to 100% of its assets in the underlying company shares. So that's how it was packaged. The problem then, of course, is you have a 25-year-old that is told, you're now an owner, you've got shares in your account, and when you retire, you'll see some cash, which is not exactly helping the 25-year-old to buy an apartment or a pickup truck or whatever it is. So we changed that too. So we have what's called the rollover. This is this circular thing. Here's the rollover, where you buy out the oldest shares or the oldest value entries in the accounts, and so that generally happens after the loan is paid off. If you've got a lot of, if you're doing great, you got a lot of cash flow, you can even start earlier. But so you see money maybe 5 years after the thing was set up, and it continues that way. So basically, people have two pockets. They have a pocket where they get their wages, and they have a pocket where they get their rollover payments as the shares are, their oldest shares are recycled and repurchased and redistributed. So that's sort of the description of the transaction, how it works. So this is just recapitulating some of the points I made. The co-op ESOP or Euro ESOP, not a trust, it's a cooperative, not a pension plan. It's something where the money can start getting to people because of their ownership long before they retire. So those are some of the differences. The benefits or the selling points, as I said, it keeps the owners retiring, and this is when it's set up for succession reasons. The company is their baby. They built it. The workers in the company helped them build it. It creates jobs, taxes, income, everything in that community. And the alternatives, unless you're going to pass it to your kids, which is less and less happening now, is selling to a financial buyer, which will look to move the job somewhere else, or to a trade buyer, which will move the business over to their main company, or to private equity, which will gut it. And in any case, 5 to 8 years, the company won't be in that community anymore. So it's part of community stabilization. It's part of keeping the jobs there. And when some of my friends in the American ESOP business are talking to an owner, trying to convince them to do an ESOP, and you have all these considerations, and the kids usually don't give a damn. They just want the biggest money for them to inherit it. And one of my friends said, well, when I'm talking to an owner, when I hear the word legacy, then I know I'm in the right church, meaning now he knows that this fellow has the right values, because he's not going to get as much money as he'd get from private equity. He's not going to get as much money from a trade buyer and so forth, but his legacy will be preserved, and his name will not be mud after 5 years, where the people in the community say, well, that's great, you got all this money, but now the company is gone. And it increases the productivity, the value added from employees being owners. And this is something that it's interesting that economists tend to ignore this and sort of assume in their models. You know the joke about assume a can opener. Well, they assume that everybody is already at maximum efficiency, and so changing ownership won't change anything. But of course it does. And what's interesting is that private equity is now starting to use employee ownership as a way to make companies more productive. So the way private equity operates is it takes out a loan, it buys a company, or majority, if not 100% ownership. It moves the debt from the borrowing to the company itself. So it has to make the company more efficient. And in the past, that has often taken the form of canceling anything that's more long-term, like an R&D department or even sales department, and just sort of cashing out the current value to pay off the loan. And then they own it free and clear with no debt. And then they try to sell it if it survives. This happened to the airline here in Slovenia. There was a national airline, and it was urged by the Brussels to you've got to allow foreign ownership to come in, and they did. It was bought by a German private equity firm, and they did exactly that. They took out a loan to buy it. They moved the debt to the company, and then they sold all the airplanes to their cronies, and the money from that was then used to pay off the loan, and they even sold the name. So here you had this airline trying to operate where what they owned previously was not a drain on cash. Now suddenly they had to pay the lease payments because they had to lease back the airplanes they used to own. And it collapsed. So Slovenia no longer has a national airline. It's a shame. A lot of the flights in and out of Ljubljana now are by Lufthansa or Swiss Air, something like that. Or you can go over to Croatia, where they didn't take the Brussels advice, and so you still have a Croatian Airlines. So anyway, that's the way private equity tends to work.
Question. From the little I understand of Germany, a lot of companies have union seats on the board. Is that right?
Yeah, the bigger companies.
Does that provide some of the increased employee retention, increase in productivity that you get from this? Is that kind of like another approach to these goals?
Not really. There's no financial component.
Right.
So there's no ownership in that. It's just seats on the board, and it's if it's typical cases or best cases where you have 50% plus one, and the plus one is determined by the management. So they don't have controlling ownership through co-determination, or Mitbestimmung it's called. And it's not a financial thing. So they may get indirectly through better union agreements, but it's not through ownership. There's no ownership component.
So policy change is influenced more by the union membership than even being on the board?
Say again?
Policy influence results more from the union membership than from the ESOP and being on the board at the same time.
In Germany, you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. Usually the co-determination is mandatory in companies of a certain size. So they're unionized companies, and so having the seats on the board would typically be union representatives, something like that, and so they may get better settlements in their union agreements, but there's no direct ownership. There's no money coming to them, to the workers, from ownership. Now that's one of the things where we have, this is sort of our institute has created a sister institute in Germany, and they are headquartered in Munich, and they already have two companies in Munich that want to make the conversion using this model. And we found a company also in Munich, incidentally, called Interatech, and it basically uses our model. It has a special purpose vehicle that is a cooperative, and they set it up on their own. So it's not like we invented the same ideas occurred to other people. And so I'm working to try to, in a few weeks, go to Munich and talk to all these people. And but it's the same problem. The small, medium-sized enterprises in Germany are called the Mittelstand, the middle stand of companies, and they're all what in America would be called an LLC as opposed to a joint stock company. So it's LLC is what's
Limited
called,
liability.
yeah, the smaller companies, it's a special thing. And well, I mean, America, everything's different with every state, but in most countries, LLC is a special type of small company. And in Slovenia, you can only have up to 50 shareholders in an LLC. And so in Germany, that's called a GmbH or GmbH, Gesellschaft mit Betragerhaftung. And so that's the Mittelstand is all companies of that sort. And of course, there's a huge succession problem coming. And so we're trying to do a few pilot cases in Germany to show that this conversion model works. We already have this one company that's already done it without any tax breaks or any specific legislation. So we know we have a proof of concept. And so we have a sister institute, which unfortunately the members are mainly academics. But so we have to work with them to try to get some people that are more private sector oriented and do some conversions and then eventually get some legislation. A lot of our money to develop our institute has actually come from the German Stiftungen. Each political party that is in parliament, they have to get enough seats in parliament to qualify, has a Stiftung, a foundation set up in their name and funded by the government. And the Der Linke, which means the left, was until quite recently one of those. They qualified by getting into parliament. And so some of our initial grants that got our institute going was actually from Der Linke office in Belgrade. They have offices all over the place, including New York. And that Stiftung is called the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung. So named after a famous Marxist.
I got a question. Do you say that those parties owned the trust and held the ESOP shares? I'm not sure when you said they're set up with some kind of a trust or.
No, that's a national thing. Each party that makes parliament in Germany is qualified to have a government-funded trust with different names. So the one on the left is called the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung.
Essentially, a tank funding mechanism. Is that right?
Yeah. And then they have offices to fund left-wing things in New York, in Belgrade, and various other countries. So we were funded initially by the one in Belgrade.
So are you saying that this was public funds that are channeled through this entity?
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
are they shareholder funds channeled through?
No, this is government money.
Okay.
Put into that. And then a few years ago, they failed to get the requisite percentage in Parliament. And so the government cut off the money, or cut it down, shall we say, and they had to close some of their offices, but they kept open the office in Belgrade because the office in Belgrade made the case to them that our model was what the left needed to do and needed to work out something like a co-op ESOP in Germany. So we continue to get funding until very recently from Belgrade. And now we have a sister organization in Belgrade, which the funds are now going to that. And they're setting up a institute like ours in Belgrade and connecting it to the students' movement. If you've been following the events in Belgrade, there's a very active students' movement that may or may not be able to change the government. So that was some of the history of what's happening in these other countries. Just to finish here, as I mentioned, one of the biggest private equity companies in America, KKR, which is what, Kohlberg, Kravitz, and Roberts or something. The leader of the industrial sector in KKR is a guy named Pete Stravos, and he is of working class origin and wants to push broad-based employee ownership. So the idea is, as I said, they buy these companies and then they make them more efficient, usually by cutting down on things. So Stravos's idea, instead of doing that, let's give all the people shares, something like 4% maybe of the total ownership simply given to the workers in the company. So it's not an ESOP, but it is broad-based. And they are restricted shares. The workers can't sell them on the outside. And then they have a nonprofit they set up called Ownership Works. You can look it up on the internet. And it's a very well-funded nonprofit that then works with these companies to introduce ownership culture programs so workers become more productive. It doesn't happen automatically just because you get shares. You need to actually convince people it's real and it's meaningful, and now you'll be treated with some dignity and your ideas will be taken seriously and so forth. And those are called ownership culture programs. And so this KKR is now trying to increase the value of their portfolio through this program. So what's interesting is you've got economists who say, no, this is, it's not as efficient and so forth. And yet you've got the people that really know something about business, private equity, saying, yeah, we're going to make broad-based employee ownership part of our strategy to make companies more efficient. But the problem is, of course, that the private equity sets up these funds where you get rich people and pension funds put in the money. So it's the owner is not private equity. It's a separate fund that KKR and BlackRock or whoever the others are set up, and they have to sell it out. The fund only exists for like 5 to 8 years, and so 5 to 8 years afterwards, the whole thing is sold, including the worker shares. So workers get a payout in 5 to 8 years, which can be 6 figures or more. And Pete makes it a big event. He has television cameras, and as he announces how much each worker who's been there so many years will get on their shares, and then you have the camera goes to the people's faces and they're crying, and it's what I call ownership porn. And so this is a controversial thing within the employee ownership movement because it's not ESOPs, it's not permanent, and then you get the workers in the company say, well, we're no longer owners, but we know how to cooperate. We have all these programs, and we'll try to keep it going, and so forth. So this is one of the big issues, but I find it amusing because people that know something about business know what economists don't know, that this actually makes people more efficient, which is totally intuitive too, that you can't just assume everybody's working at maximum efficiency, regardless of the ownership relationship. And private equity understands that very well now. And if you Google on Ownership Works, you'll see their nonprofit that gets other private equity firms to make pledges that they'll do this in their portfolio and so forth. So employee ownership in one form or another is now moving into what's called the Overton window, the sort of window of policy discussions that you can actually talk about. And the only people that haven't heard of it yet are the Democratic Party, that they're struggling to reacquire their members from the working class, and they haven't yet come up with the idea of funding, pushing ESOPs. And I don't know why. They're just a bunch of idiots. Anyway, okay, preventing brain drain, lowering capital mobility, and this is part of the language now. Is this sort of thing is called pre-distributive as opposed to redistributive. This is a language thought up by political scientist at Yale, Jacob Hacker, and the usual thing on the left is you let rich people earn the money and then you tax it away from them and distribute it to lower income people in some way, and that's called redistributive. And Hacker says we should instead have pre-distributive, which means you change the production of wealth at the workplace so workers get wealth directly rather than let it go to the owners, rich owners, and then tax it away and so forth. So that's just some language you should be aware of.
Is that standard, or how ubiquitous is that?
Policy circles, it's getting there.
Oh, so it's nascent. Okay. It sounds like a great idea, so I'm wondering why.
Ask a few questions here.
Sure.
Number one, it seems to me that this is a perfect model to frame as the middle between the left and the right, capitalism versus social communism, whatever. And the people say anything that's not capitalistic is communism, that kind of stuff. So it seems like there's just a really wide open spot for this kind of an idea to hit political discussions. That this accomplishes both. Immediately begs the question: what do you do with Amazon and Jeff Bezos with $1 billion and
Yeah, well, there's
how does that capital get refocused or redistributed?
you can do it in a publicly traded company. There's no contradiction there. You can't do it in a publicly owned, in a state enterprise. But you could do it in Amazon or Tesla or any of those. You could have an ESOP. Instead, they tend to operate on the basis of stock options, that sort of thing.
I'm sorry, they do it on the basis of what?
Stock options.
Oh, stock options. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
But the balance is already so much, the founder's equity is already represented by, very narrow band of shareholders. Does that require redistribution of the Amazon wealth distribution?
Well, if you, I don't think you're going to get the political will to make any sort of major redistribution.
Yeah.
But if the Democrats ever discover ESOPs, then you, in theory, could have major redistribution that way over time. This would be, something like a 20-year period. And so even, one of our models we pushed is in your platform cooperatives, the Uber or Lyft and all that. Wherever they're set up, there's a local company that actually runs the thing. And so we have urged governments or cities not to license Uber unless they set up a ESOP in the local Slovene company. That's Uber Slovenia, say, or Uber Austria, and as a way to attack it. So then the workers in Uber are members of that ESOP and gives them a whole different position vis-a-vis the platform than what they have now, which is not even an employee status. They're viewed as just, job workers, jobbers, and so all sorts of ways in which the idea can be used.
And the ESOP facilitate health benefits and that kind of thing?
Well, it's it's illegal to pay for the ESOP by reducing health benefits or even reducing wages. So it's primarily in companies that are not on the road to bankruptcy. It's not what's called lemon socialism, the save the lemons from being shut down. And so it should not affect health benefits negatively. And the statistics is that people not only get better wages in addition to the six-figure thing when they retire, but they get better benefits, they get a better 401k and so forth. And it's in general, they're more productive, have better retention through COVID. A lot of employee-owned companies refused to go down in COVID. Instead, everybody took a huge wage cut and they survived, whereas a lot of normal companies just collapsed under COVID. And so, yeah, that's, I mean, there's a whole literature on this. It's been built up over time. And so the statistics is really not the problem. The problem is just basically class prejudice, that shares for workers is socialism and shares for rich people is capitalism. And we don't want socialism. And we have the same thing here in Slovenia. We have opposition from the right saying shares to workers is socialism. But shares to their cronies is capitalism.
I have to run. I'm sorry, David. I can say that I'm a poster child for a successful ESOP participation. And my company that I worked for, it was just a wonderful example of it. And after about 5 years, I was more interested in the welfare of the company than my income. I was actually asking for options instead of salary, just because of the nature of the thing. And we were a time sold company, so by keeping my salary down, I kept my cost to my customer down, but increased my ownership in the company.
Right.
And,
so you benefit from that.
I reached retirement age at age 50, so it worked out pretty well for me. Okay, I'll see you guys all later. Thanks a lot, and see you next
Okay,
week.
Tom. Good
Bye-bye.
seeing you, Tom.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Tom's company was Science Application International Company, or SAIC, in San Diego. And it was basically a company that worked 100% for the Pentagon. And but it was the head of it was devoted to employee ownership. And so that's what Tom benefited from, was his ownership in the company, and was able
A
to retire.
documented laboratory experiment. That's great.
Yeah. And that founder, his name is Beister. And so his large portion of company shares, when the whole thing was eventually sold, it didn't survive after he retired, because the new managers, see, the problem was the shares could only be bought back for the people in the company. Whereas if you have a broader market, you can get a better price. So once the owner died, the new management said, well, let's go public. And everybody cashed in with better prices because they had a much broader group of buyers than just the other people in the company. And so that money went to the family, and the family formed the foundation called the Beister Foundation. You can look it up. And they have an office in the School of Management of University of California, San Diego. The management school there is called the RADY, R-A-D-Y Management School, and there's an office in there of the Beister Foundation, and they do ESOP work from that basis. So those are examples closer to where you are. I'm almost finished here. And these ones that we're trying to do, say in Germany, we did here before the law. This is called the pilot phase. We did 3 companies, but basically one bigger one. And it's been fantastic. It's 100% employee owned with no tax breaks or anything. And that was restricted to DOOs, is the Slovene version of LLC, and so forth. We had they did it without any tax benefits, but with our law, these ESOP contributions, they are, first of all, they are they're tax deductible for the company. So the company doesn't pay corporate tax on them. They're a deductible expense. Secondly, in Slovene companies, as in America, you have Social Security tax on your wages. And in Slovenia, that is substantial because Slovenia is like a Nordic country with a very high level of social welfare. And something like 35–40% of your salary. And that is also relaxed for ESOP contributions. And then the money goes to the ESOP as a separate cooperative in our case, and it's not taxable there as income. So the whole transaction is without taxes. And then the money passes through to the seller, and the seller gets tax benefits then on their income if they sell to an ESOP as opposed to selling to somebody else. And so these are all things that were put into the law and that past year. And that was, of course, one reason why it took a good while to get it through the government, because obviously the finance ministry did not want to cut down on the tax base. But that woman I showed you in the picture there, at first from the finance ministry, she convinced them that this was basically a win, and you kept more companies going, you got higher productivity, and the kept the communities going, and so forth, so that it was actually a longer term win for Slovenia than just the short-term tax breaks that you get when you set it up.
Question?
Yeah.
No, thank you.
I can stop the slides now.
Okay.
There we go.
So these three companies, in the pilot phase, they went this route without those tax benefits.
Right.
And those tax benefits now apply fully to them under the new law, though they were already.
They will. Well, the law comes into effect on January 1.
Right.
And there'll have to be some sort of a re-registration or something. I'm not to qualify.
They will be able to.
Well, their future
requirements of the new law and benefit from all of that.
I don't know if they'll get past money back. They pay no tax.
Right. No, yeah, but in everything from January 1st.
Future. And they're already 100%. So the tax benefits to the sellers, the main one is an engineering company with about 110 workers on the outskirts of Ljubljana. And it was set up prior actually to the whole collapse of socialism, year or two before, spun out of a research institute, University of Ljubljana Engineering. And then when everything was privatized, everybody got vouchers. Even though we defeated the voucher law, there was no law for a year or two, and then they passed a law that was a combination of our two laws back in the 90s, and everybody got vouchers, but you could spend the vouchers on your own company. You didn't have to put your vouchers in a diversified voucher fund and blah, 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 which was actually the point of the ruling class. Wanted workers not to have power in their own companies, wanted them to be day traders, or, like put in your money in Fidelity or some big mutual fund. And so that was back in the 90s. And so now all those workers who were individual shareholders with no ESOP were retiring. And they organized and together, and they said, let's find a good buyer for our shares. And they wanted to sell out to some big German engineering company like Siemens or something. And at that time there was, I don't know, 80 or so workers in the company, and something like 60 or 70 of them signed a letter sent to them saying if you don't cooperate with our attempt to set up an ESOP and you sell out to another company, we're gone. You don't think we can't find other jobs in high-tech companies around Ljubljana? And then the workers had retired and wanted to sell out to some big company, negotiate a sale. And it took all the working capital of the company to make the payments to pay them off. And so they were really strapped for better part of a year. They had very little working capital. They really had to, tighten their belts, and no banks would make them a loan, and so forth. So, but they survived. Now they're doing fine. They've become our flagship example, and that's a company called INEA, INEA. And
you advise them through all of this. Your institute helped
we
them
tried.
set up that structure.
We tried to, and it turned out that they were also listening to an economist over a research institute in the economics faculty that didn't give a damn about employee ownership. So some of the advice we would give them, they would actually do something that was actually illegal, because the economist over in the other institute didn't know what was legal and what wasn't. And then we would come and say, no, you can't do that. Well, we've already done it. Well, you got to change it. So it was a bumpy road. It wasn't like some, miraculous transformation. And that's like almost every company we work with. Every company is different, and they have their own. It's what's the thing about Tolstoy, that every happy family is happy in the same way, every unhappy family. So these are like a lot of families that are all different, and you've got to work with each one to figure out how the hell are we going to do the deal. And but they, due to their own courage and their own commitment, signing that letter and getting the outside people to cooperate. So now one of the companies we want to do, or our friends want us to do, is actually a company of 1,500 workers that makes precision electrical motors, which are basically sold in Germany. And years ago, there was a takeover bid by an American company, and workers organized together, bought more shares, and finally managed to defeat that. But the woman manager who organized that is now retired. There's a new manager, and he is sympathetic to the ESOP and all that, but it's, they have the same problem of all these workers now are retirement age, the older workers, and they want to sell their shares and they want to get a good price. We bought our next to last car from a retiree, and once we learned that he worked at this company, we said, oh, we'll probably set up an ESOP someday in your company, and you can sell your share to the ESOP, and would you do that? And he says, yeah, well, I'll consider it, see what the bid is, so forth. So it's not a done deal that the workers who've retired will sell their shares to the ESOP. And the ESOP, if it has to match the bid of some American private equity coming in, we could have a real problem. And so, I'm trying to stay out of the direct day-to-day work of my institute. I'm president, but I'm a passive president. And my young friend is the one that does all these negotiations.
This is fantastic stuff, David.
Yeah.
And this is, it's seeding, right? You're sowing seeds. And when people see that these seeds grow into, healthy trees, then, it can
So
start.
David is a Johnny Applesop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Applesop.
I could use that, but I don't think the Slovenes would understand it.
Yeah, cultural reference. Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yeah. No, really interesting. That You know, it seems so fraught with a real positive promise, and still the obstacles remain. The psychology of it is interesting. But we have Winco here, so I'm going to look into that. I've never been to a
Yeah.
Winco here.
Yeah.
No, Winco is quite interesting. It's perfectly quality food and it's cheaper.
It's,
And
it's excellent. It's excellent. Yeah.
yeah. So and whatever that appliance company was, I keep forgetting.
Oh,
Alexander's or something.
it's not Taylor. I know there's, yeah.
Henry's. I don't know. I can't remember.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, we bought a microwave, and the person we were dealing with had a thing on his lapel says, "I've been an ESOP member for 10 years."
Oh,
I'm
wow.
Joe. So they were advertising it to all their customers could see they were not just a salesperson, they were a member of the company. And that's, one of the big ESOPs in America are, in fact, the biggest ones are grocery chains.
You think Winco is up there with them?
Yeah, Winco is, I think, number 3 now. And
Yeah.
the biggest one is Publix in southeast Florida.
Yeah.
Publix. And in the Midwest, you have one called Hy-Vee, Hyvee, in Iowa and Missouri. And in Oklahoma, you got one called Homeland. And the Winco stands for Washington, Idaho, Nevada, California, and Oregon. So it's Winco. And those are all the states where they operate now. So yeah.
You've spoken in the past about Mondragon in Spain. Is that a different model?
That's a worker cooperative. So when our cooperative gets 100%, then it is a Mondragon cooperative.
Oh, okay.
Equivalent. So Mondragon doesn't have a conversion mechanism to convert all their all their companies are either startups or spin-offs from existing cooperatives. And
they come into being as cooperatives.
Yeah. Whereas our model is deliberately a conversion model. It converts a normal company into essentially a worker co-op. So like ANIA, this company that's 100%, they're like a cooperative now. And the problem in Mondragon is that they are not saints. They are racist, like a lot of people. And everywhere they set up companies outside of the Basque country, they're Basque people, then they do it as a normal subsidiary. So they have companies in Morocco, in China, in Poland, in Mexico, Argentina, all over the world. They have companies, and they're all just subsidiaries. And
so they're not, those local branches are not co-ops.
No.
Wow.
And so for years, people have been pointing this out to them. And so we have now written a paper saying, here is the model you can use to convert over, say, 10, 15-year period, all of your subsidiaries into Mondragon cooperatives. And I mean, I understand why they couldn't do it originally. I mean, you can't, set up a whole factory in Poland and then give the ownership to whoever walks in off the street to get a job in Poland or in China or in Mexico. But if you do it over a 15-year period, then so you gradually build up the local ownership and so forth. Their business will still be with Mondragon because they're producing components and stuff for Mondragon goods that are being sold.
So the ESOP is like a slow drip IV till they get to the cooperative phase.
Yeah. And there's a group of economists on employee ownership, and they're having their next meeting in Mondragon in July next year. And so we're launching an attack with our paper at that Congress, and we're trying to find companies in the Mondragon. It's like 80 or 100 companies or so now, and that have these subsidiaries and say, okay, you know, you guys keep saying, you know, someday we're gonna fix this problem. Well, here's the way you can do it.
Hmm.
And you know, so our problem is we don't have any problem with applications for the model. We don't have people, you know. The guy who's the head of my institute he's the one that understands everything more than any of the other people. I was a mentor on his PhD thesis, so now he's an assistant professor. So he has to become a professor. At the same time, he's running the institute, and now he's got a baby coming in April, and now we have another guy. We're forming a for-profit, and we've got a great name for it. The name of it is in Slovene, solasnik.si, which is the website, but that's actually in Slovene means co-owner are you. So, so is co, Lasnik is owner. So it's solasnik.si and .si, which stands for Slovenia, because SL was taken up by Sierra Leone.
Oh,
So it means co-owner are you. So it's a wonderful name for a company. But the guy great guy who's agreed to be the CEO of that is now having medical problems. And he's older, he's in his 40s somewhere. And so we're having trouble launching that. And we don't have other people. I mean, we've got a bunch of interns, which is easy to get. And so somehow we have to figure out how do you get people, you know, we basically don't have any money because we haven't done the deals yet. And people who have skills and have other jobs are saying, well, if we come over, I want a guaranteed salary for 3 years. And we can't do that. So you need people that are older, not interns, that have skills and are willing to take a leap and come on board to do this work without having a salary guaranteed. And we haven't found those people yet. So.
We're rooting for you, man. This is fantastic stuff. This is, like you say, I mean, there's a handful of things that the Democrats in this country absolutely need to latch onto.
Yeah.
And this is one of them. I mean, universal care is the
good
other.
point.
Now, take, for example, the left of the Democratic Party are still trying to use the word socialism.
Yeah.
Bernie is calling himself a democratic socialist.
Yeah.
I don't know how the election's going today. Maybe you guys know more than me.
Nothing
yet.
yet.
But he's calling himself Democrat, calling himself a socialist, and he's trying to set up city-owned things. Why doesn't he set up worker cooperatives? I mean, or ESOPs? I mean, you could have a, you know, whatever grocery chains are in New York, you could put pressure on them to set up an ESOP that was significant, you know, maybe majority even, and instead of trying to set up a city-owned grocery store, really. I mean, you do have city-owned grocery stores, but they're in food deserts, you know, where no other private grocery chain will come in. And New York is not a food desert at all. New York is the greatest culinary capitals in the world. So I'm telling my friends, will you get a hold of this guy and tell him that stop using the word socialism and learn about employee ownership.
He's going to meet a lot of headwinds once he gets in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And this, if he does ESOP, then that's something that Republicans support.
And,
but they're just so.
Yeah, the Republicans won't support anything at the moment,
right.
While their brains are turned to mush by Trump. But post-Trump, we can hope that there will be some human.
Well, is that two ESOP bills just passed the Senate unanimously?
Yeah. This is
one of the bills.
I had no idea that the Senate had passed anything at all.
Yeah.
In the last 9 months.
Do you know who the senators are who sponsored this? the people who have the ear of,
I'll send you some literature.
okay,
Yeah.
Losing my voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've made you talk enough. So
yeah,
One of the bills was previously co-sponsored by Marco Rubio
oh, wow,
before his brain turned to mush when
yeah,
he
yeah,
joined Trump. So even then, I mean, Marco Rubio pretends to be a Catholic social, what do you call it? Catholic social doctrines, and supported it for that reason. And now he's
it's turned, yeah, that's,
a bloody Trump guy.
yeah,
But yeah, I'll send you
Yeah.
something on what happened there in the Senate.
Yeah.
It's amazing. From Slovenia, you know more about what's going on than we do.
Thank all the internet,
Yeah,
no,
no. I mean, I'm in there all the time, but I never saw anything about this.
Yeah,
But-
not at all.
yeah,
It's not on most
right,
people's.
I'm surprised, Brian, even to learn that there are people as high as senators who are aware of this phenomenon to begin with.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like some arcane guy in a garage who has this wacko idea. I mean, we have laboratory experiments, we have Winco, we have establishments in this
a
country.
massive present. This is amazing. 10% of private workers, private company workers, are covered
Yeah.
by ESOPs. That's
Yeah.
astonishing.
Yeah, this,
And the trade union movement is 6% and going down.
Yeah, and
And-
another day.
Yeah.
I want to get you talking about the relationship between trade unions
Yeah.
and ESOPs,
Well,
and
it's
could an ESOP be unionized? Why are so many trade unions opposed to ESOPs?
well, I have my theories, but it's an unsolved problem. The company that wants lined up to be the first one to become an ESOP under the law is the biggest newspaper in Slovenia, called Delo, which is Slovene for work. And the management is all in favor and everything's going forward. And then the union of the journalists says, well, wait a minute.
so,
What about us? You'll be members of the ESOP. Well, we want to negotiate with the management, not be owners. And so that my friend, that guy who's the head of he is trying to talk to both sides now and trying to work it out. But it'd be a major victory if the biggest newspaper in the country becomes an
Because
ESOP.
you get the press.
Yeah.
You can wake up the press. Then that's half the battle.
yeah,
Yeah, there is an old tradition of press being employee owned. I mean, Le Monde, for example, and a lot of newspapers go in and out of The Guardian, for example, is owned by a foundation,
Yeah.
and all that. But yeah, we got to work it out. And there's been some smaller newspapers in Slovenia that are worker owned, but this is the big one. This is Delo.
Wow.
And so we're trying to, or my young colleague, who wasn't even born when I was here before for my first radio,
yeah.
is trying
Wow.
to negotiate that. So,
Wow.
It's challenging being a Johnny Applesop.
yeah.
David, you need to rest your throat.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
This is fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
I'll now go and read the stuff you sent us this morning. So.
Yeah, okay, I'll send you some
pleasant
stuff.
surprise. Pleasant surprises day, David. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for listening.
You bet.
Oh,
See you
love
next
it.
week.
And we've recorded it, so
Oh, good. Okay.
and it'll take a day to get it
Pops
in
and
a
all.
format I can send you.
Yeah, good. Okay, see you guys next
Okay.
time.
Thank you. Bye.
Right.